Here we go. So this event will be recorded tonight, and we will post the talk on our YouTube page in the next week or two, along with the other talks by the artists in this exhibition from October at Welcome Gallery, Patrick Costello and Sandy Williams. So this is the third talk in a series of talks by artists who have work in an exhibition at Welcome Gallery this month called Situated Knowledge. So for those of you who aren't familiar with New City Arts, we're a community arts organization that runs a handful of community programs for artists and community members. And one of those programs is a downtown gallery space where we feature predominantly monthly exhibitions by artists who live here or have lived here in the case of this month's exhibition. In a moment, I'm going to put the link to the exhibition in the chat. Today was the last day of the show, but we'll have images that were taken throughout the month because some of the works changed throughout the exhibition, taken by Derek Waller. We will post those on our Facebook page in the next few weeks so that for those of you who weren't able to see the work in person, you'll be able to experience the exhibition virtually. The exhibition Situated Knowledge brings together 3 artists who were invited by New City Arts to make works connected to monuments. So they had each made works that were site-specific and very large outside of the gallery space. We commissioned them to make works that were in conversation with one another and could fit through the gallery doors for this last month. And those 3 artists have spent formative years in Charlottesville and have a shared interest in local, embodied, and situated knowledge. Patrick Costello, who I mentioned earlier, earned a BA in printmaking from UVA in 2008. Sandy Williams earned a BFA from UVA in 2016. And Marisa Williamson, who we will hear from tonight, was UVA's Rough and Distinguished Artist in Residence in 2018 and returned this year as an assistant professor of visual art with a research focus on Blackness. Marisa is the one who wrote the beautiful exhibition statement that I will drop the link to in the chat. And I wanted to just read 3 sentences from that statement to give you a little bit of context for the exhibition as a whole. The artists experiment with gestures that remediate erasure, taking into account the unaccounted for. They engage in a certain type of feminist archaeology, a practice of dismantling that which was designed to hide and to obscure. At the same time, the works cannot hide the struggle. Our problem, to summarize Donna Haraway's thesis in Situated Knowledges, the science question in feminism and the privilege of partial perspective, is how to have simultaneously a traumatic knowledge of painful legacies and at the same time not be defined, disillusioned, and dismantled by that knowledge. This exhibition was presented by the fund at CACF and sponsored by Lisa M. Drain, who's here tonight. So I just wanted to thank you so much for your sponsorship. The sponsorship for the exhibition directly covered all of the costs for the commissions for each artist. So we're very thankful for your support. So we're ready to dive in. I'm going to introduce Marisa and Tori and hand things over, and then we will get started. Marisa Williamson is a project-based artist who works in video, image making, installation, and performance. She has produced site-specific works at Storm King Art Center, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and Spaces Cleveland, and by commission from Monument Lab and the National Park Service. Her work has been featured in exhibitions at Art Poetica, Soho 20, and Brick in Brooklyn, the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts in NYC, Vox Populi in Philadelphia, Mana Contemporary Chicago, and Human Resources in LA. Williamson has been awarded grants from the Graham Foundation, the Remo Hortman Foundation, and the Arthur and Elizabeth Schlesinger Library on the History of Women in America. She was a participant in the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in 2012 and the Whitney Museum's Independent Study in 2014-2015. Williamson holds a BA from Harvard University and an MFA from Cal Arts. Tori Cherry is an artist based in Charlottesville. She is a 2021-2022 ONSPA 5th-year fellow at the University of Virginia. Her paintings and drawings serve as sites for personal documentation, reflection, and connection. Through portraiture and still life inspired by her loved ones, her surroundings, and herself, she highlights the paradoxical uniqueness and the universality of experience. More recently, her work explores the relationship between figure and space and how that interaction manifests in embodied idiosyncrasies. Tori's first solo exhibition opens next Friday at Welcome Gallery from 5 to 7:30. We would love to see you all there. She's going to talk more about her work, but I will also drop a link to that exhibition in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I am going to turn it over to Marisa.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled to see so many people here. It feels like a nice group of friends and supporters, and that's really thrilling. I'm recovering from food poisoning, so I'm also just really delicate right now. So it is especially nice to see loved ones in the crowd and to be able to be here tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the work came to be at the gallery, um, and show just a really hope it will be quick little no, that's not what I'm trying to do. Present that quickly give some folks a background on my work, and just describe some of the impulses behind this work and the broader projects that I engage in. So in the gallery at New City Arts, you see a bed on top of what is a kind of plinth pedestal made out of dirt. And that came out of a long, meandering project where I was trying to make a monument to Sally Hemings. And that work really started through performance. And in 2013, got this idea while I was in grad school at Cal Arts, having read Annette Gordon Reed's book and having traveled to Monticello and to Charlottesville as a kid, and wanting to figure out how Sally Hemings, why I kept being drawn to her, because for some reason her life seemed interesting. She seemed to live on the threshold of different worlds. And I wanted to understand how a life like hers might offer insight into the ways that the past is not really gone or behind us or dead, and that, another woman living in this time could possibly share the space that she once shared, and in so doing, by inhabiting a shared space, challenge perceptions of that an audience might have around how the past really is. I'd gotten a lot of this out of studying with one particular mentor, Charles Gaines, who introduced this idea of metonym, the idea of that rather than a metaphor where something is like or as, a simile, that a metonym is in fact a substitution of one thing for another, like a naming process where you say, like, the White House issued a statement today. And then, of course, that the White House didn't say something, but that the White House is standing in for the administration itself. So I've been interested in figuring out how metonym, how substitution of one body for another, or, placing the name of one thing on one person on another person might serve as a way to kind of challenge the boundaries and the possibilities of monument. And that had been done through performance for several years. And one of my big goals is to unsettle and to figure out how to haunt, how to keep things moving, how to agitate through these various forms of performance and monument making. So the early performance in 2013 involved going to Monticello, lurking around there. I had permission, but I gave kind of limited description of what I would be doing there. But was really struck, over the years, Monticello has done a better job of marking the space for what it is. What it is an African-American graveyard. If it's confusing, sorry. It's become less so, but Monticello was a place where people were worked to death, who people died having worked there their entire lives. So I was particularly interested in how to foreground the kind of ghost story that sites like Monticello present. And that work at Monticello led to just other opportunities to perform as this Sally Hemings incarnate, one of which was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where I was making connections between the material culture that's preserved at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, who is unseen in the preservation of that material culture, and what connections can be drawn between the objects there and the objectified people who would have shared the space. This is the Alexandria Ballroom, where George Washington had some of his birthdays and which was transported to New York City. to teach people about material culture in America. And then this tour is down at Storm King Art Center, which had kind of similar themes there. And then work involved creating video, kind of seaming and sewing together disparate video elements in order to put people in conversation who wouldn't ordinarily be in conversation. One way of unsettling or haunting to me is to be able to bring together groups of people who were otherwise isolated through time or through context, and to produce a kind of chorus of voices. In this case, Monica Lewinsky, who has a lot to say, a kind of interesting figure who was part of my childhood, but then in reflection offers us a lot of insight into what it means to be like a scandalous person. Whoopi Goldberg, who's like a talk show host, Oprah, Marilyn Monroe, and Sally Hemings, and then Ben Affleck, who had gotten in trouble around that time for, it was like, I don't know what he was doing. He was on Finding Your Roots, and he wanted to hide from his roots. And so these women are kind of interrogating him. And then a really exciting opportunity came up, an opportunity that actually allowed me to depart a bit from performing. I don't know if you have like a gray thing. Okay, that's better. It allowed me to depart a little bit from performing Sally Hemings, which had begun to be a little bit burdensome. And it was an opportunity with Monument Lab, which is a great organization that just got a huge grant, but at the time was small and trying to figure out how to kind of incubate opportunities for artists to experiment with monuments in Philadelphia. And they offered me the opportunity to create something. And I created this augmented reality smartphone app, which you can download, Sweet Chariot. And along with the paper map, which you can ask me about it, I can give you one. You can find your way around historic Philadelphia and unlock videos by holding your phone over images in the landscape. So plaques, murals, numbers on houses. As long as you can find them under this, scratch off map, you can discover these stories of the African-American struggle for freedom as presented through videos, collaborative videos, the historical journey for freedom through time for African-Americans in Philadelphia. And so this was another opportunity, along with like splicing up video and putting people in conversation. It was another opportunity to create a kind of chorus of voices that together, I think, are able to reinforce some of these demands for reparation and justice that on her own, I think Sally Hemings, the character, wasn't able to do. And oops, oh, there's a video here. Ignore that. You can see those videos on the website, Sweet Chariot. So please feel free to check those out. Oh my God, I'm so confused. And this was the site, it was playground that had been a burial ground. So where I had been offered this location, Wekako Playground, in order to, make a monument. And while they wouldn't allow me to make a swing set, the augmented reality smartphone app was my alternative to creating some sort of play space. And it drew me to this idea of like what to do with burial grounds, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. They pop up all over the place. There's a great article in the New Yorker recently about African-American burial grounds, which are frequently being discovered. And I think for me, the question is, how do we still cohabit with ghosts, and how do we find ways to cohabit ethically with ghosts, and also grow, and how can especially young people find ways to commune with the dead that really forge new ways ahead for all of us. Because when I was growing up, I felt like that connection with the past, that kind of communication with those who came before me, really shaped who I am and continues to do so. So other projects very quickly that have inspired this kind of like performance and interaction was an escape room, which brought together a performer performing as Sally Hemings instead of me. That was wonderful. A performer performing Phyllis Wheatley, an excellent poet and fascinating life story. full of mystery, full of challenges to, what it means to be an artist, an enslaved artist. And Tituba, one of the first people accused of being a witch in Salem Village. And so this project was an effort to take people through the stories of these women's lives and kind of overlap that kind of history with this present phenomena of the escape room, where people come together and play games in an effort to escape. I was really interested in the impossibility of escape for these women and what insight they could offer to contemporary game players about the past and the impossibility of the escape through this kind of game space. And then I got to go to UVA as the Ruffin artist in residence and got to play around with whiteness and was thinking about the ghost of Thomas Jefferson, which, I was really, like many people, I didn't live here at the time, but was really challenged by the resurgence of white supremacy, and also having gotten my DNA tested, doing one of these DNA tests. And so it was kind of personally and as part of the collective trying to figure out what it meant to kind of consider whiteness as a surface, as a costume, as a history, as a part of one's identity, that means fairly little to me within the like construct of my identity, but of course is with us whether or not we embrace it fully, and is certainly with us here. Whiteness is with us here when we're wandering through the grounds of UVA, and the ghost of Thomas Jefferson is of course here all the time. But that work led to figuring out how to construct another type of tour. Similarly, figuring out how to bring the voices of multiple people to the foreground and collaborating with local artists here in Charlottesville. This is Brandon Lee, who is a reenactor and an educator, all around just like fun dude. And he agreed to partner with me to figure out how to construct a tour that took people around the grounds and introduce them to ideas of history, often that are like, there's a lot of good architecture and structures here that discuss the history of the enslaved and the history of free Blacks in this region, but very rarely is that architecture activated. And so we have been working for a few years along with Leslie Scott Jones and Brandon's mom, Sylvia Tablee, to figure out what alternate, a new type of augmented reality experience, tour. Don't know if it's going to be a game, but a way for people to discover the stories of the African-American struggle for freedom here in Charlottesville. And then out of that, in addition to that, on top of that, thinking about a place for, and maybe this app would be a place for, the seedbed, this monument to the foremother that continues to be at the heart of these questions of how to recognize, honor, and perpetuate these legacies of resistance that for me, Sally Hemings not only represents, but that she also kind of encourages in us and in others. Maybe the monument's not so much about her singularly, but about the feminist archaeological practice that her life kind of encourages us to think about. Like, how do you look for something when it's been made invisible? And how do you honor someone about whom you don't know everything, but what they mean to America or to other people, to individuals. So here's some performance, kind of post Sally Hemings performance, where you see seedbed in one of its many incarnations, iterations. And then most recently, I'd been kind of sketching up, having the seedbed on a plinth, and the plinth being something people could look into and kind of discover things in this this dirt core sample from the earth, as though someone has dug up a bit of like a big block from the earth, and that what you're seeing in it are buried histories, not just of Sally Hemings, but of other histories that would go unseen. And ultimately, this was a really excellent and fun and funded opportunity to try to make that most recent iteration of the monument bring it to life. So when Maureen approached me, I was like, oh, I will absolutely do seedbed again, but this time I want seedbed to be this new thing. And I don't know if it can be done. I think it can be done. The budget certainly made it possible to be done, but what you see in the gallery, what you would have seen in the gallery, what you can see in these images is a bed with plants growing out of it. And then you can see Tori here using her phone to unlock augmented reality information from objects that are quote unquote buried in the bed, buried in the core sample that supports the monument. So it's the foundation of the monument. And yeah, I'll leave it at that, but I hope that gives you just an idea of like where the work came from very, very quickly, and where I hope it's going, which is to create this large augmented reality experience for Albemarle County that kind of floats around Charlottesville and gets at the histories that are buried here, which require really group effort to uncover. It's not about me finding those histories, but about getting other people to help put objects in the dirt to figure out, what stories have yet to be told. I think that's it. Oh my gosh. So I think, yeah, I would love, yeah, we could chat, Tori. I'm excited for Tori shows. Tori and I had a nice studio visit a couple weeks ago, maybe, and I was blown over by how well observed her work is and her shared interest in kind of family and abstraction. So I was super thrilled to have the chance to sit down with Tori and be able to talk about my work, but also about her work, which is going to go up very soon. She's been hustling. And so I thank her for taking time to be here today to talk with me about art.
Thank you for having me and inviting me. And my first question that I did want to ask you kind of does have to do with that studio visit, but one of the connections you made between your work and mine is the use of obscurity as a tool. And I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you're using obscurity within your work and why you feel like that's a useful tool for the specific subjects that you're working with.
Yeah, well, I found recently this idea from Sadia Hartman, who I'd read a lot of her work, but she's always coming out with new stuff. Her name, Sadia, well, I'll let people putting her name in the chat. And she said that the ancestors, she's really invested in critical fabulation, which I'm interested in, the idea of having to use the knowledge you have to try to piece together histories that are hidden. And she is like a historian, but also kind of creating historical fiction by, going through the archive and finding what she can and then piecing together stories for people. But she said that the ancestors are also entitled to obscurity, and that was a kind of recent discovery. And that made me think about what I've learned trying to like reenact Sally Hemings or enact or embody, is that there's really an impossibility of like doing that well. And I don't think I even set out to particularly do it well. But that she really is entitled to a certain degree of obscurity. I was interested in like getting into her interior world, figuring out what Sally Hemings thought and what would have motivated her, what her desires might have been. It was a painful, thought exercise at times. But I realized obscurity might be something that is also part of this question of erasure. Like, what things do you let stay erased? And maybe our job is not to like, fix the erasure or fill it in, but to like augment the erasure or highlight the erasure or center the erasure, or use it to unsettle other people. And I think in your paintings, Tori, there's like a way that there's scale, but then the like emphasis on the fact that no matter how close you get to them, they become no more clear, is a really compelling element of painting. And I guess there's something in my work, like when you use the augmented reality, sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes it doesn't give you the information you wanted. It's not like a curator being like, well, what you've discovered here. It doesn't always tell you the whole story, even though you've done your best to download the app and hack it. So I think for me, there's something in form that can actually convey sentiment about, you know, obscurity. Like the form itself can, and the action that the viewer has to take can actually teach the viewer about your relationship as an artist to the past. And I want people to like know how it feels to sometimes embrace, like, to learn about history. I want them to know how it, like, I find as a Black woman, learning about history is not always a revelatory activity. It doesn't always reveal what I want it to.
That is a great point. I also was wondering why Sally Hemings specifically was a person of interest or a persona that you are interested in portraying, specifically because, like you mentioned, like there are things you can't know. You don't have all the information. So why her as opposed to anyone else who you might have more information, access to information about them?
Yeah. I think I thought she was like not that great. I think when I learned about her, I was like, oh no, she's not like a freedom fighter. She's not a runaway. She's not a revolt. She didn't stage a revolt. And I'd been raised to kind of be drawn to those people, like my mom would be like, who's our national hero? And I'd be like, Martin Luther King, like taught that there's a arcana of individuals from which we can pick. And Sally Hemings was not one of them, from whom there were lessons to be learned about liberation. And yet the more I learned about her, the more I wondered if the lessons to be learned from her were in fact ones that offer a more complicated view of what I was coming to understand feminism to mean, which is, covert resistance, the non-exceptional. I mean, there's also an interesting article out right now about the right to mediocrity for Black people. And that's taken a long time to kind of arrive at some of these discourses around like what we do with people who seem not to fulfill expectations around like being exceptional or radical or something like that. But I think in fact Sally Hemings is radical, and that's what she does is kind of at the root of lots of modes of resistance or struggle, which is to be trying as a victim, squarely a victim in her youth. Like I don't know how else to characterize her being groomed while separated from her family. Nothing like good to say about that origin story for how she comes into what we think of her as her power, the power to kind of unseat in time this powerful man, or at least like disturb his legacy. But I think I was really drawn to what it would mean to explore a person who is not doesn't come by freedom in the like respectability politics way. And that seemed really like it was going to be hard and interesting work to do. And also she comes by power through a proximity to whiteness, and that was something I worried about and felt I worry about that, and felt like I relate to that, and also feel the kind of blues around that. Like I was thought she might be someone for whom there's kind of a blues motif around her life, a sadness. Um, and I think I wanted to explore that as it relates to a modern life where, and trying to figure out what it means to like get ahead in worlds that are primarily white. Yeah, but it's tough. It was tough.
Yeah.
And it's hard when
To say
you
the
are an
least.
artist and you're like immersed in an art world that's, what I mean, just the more I think my attraction to her came in many ways out of further immersion in an art world and in academia, and like trying to, edify myself and wondering what the costs of that are.
Yeah. I really love the way that you talk about the interactions between past and present, and something I read in your artist statement that you wrote describing like your works was that your works provide insight not only into how history is understood, but how it is felt. And I can see that in the work you have here. I'm in the gallery, by the way. In the fact that you're using what you called everyday monuments for like personal memorabilia,
Yeah.
and in previous work and how you're prioritizing, or what it seems to me that you're prioritizing emotion and like the sensory aspects of history.
Yeah.
And to me, that signals to the viewer that the history you're portraying had to do with real people who lived real lives the same way that we are. And you're portraying history in a way that I think that traditional monuments fail to do. I think traditional monuments kind of treat past and present as two completely separate things, like they aren't two spaces that interact with each other and inform our understanding and relationship to them. In your work, memorializes the past in a way that allows viewers to connect and relate to it in a more active way. But my other question was, what does that idea of monument mean to you? Because it seems like you're approaching it differently to how people might traditionally understand the idea of monument.
Yeah. That's a great observation about the everyday life. Yeah, I really am really interested in everyday life because, yeah, I mean, I think when I set out to try to understand, well, what you miss when you go to Monticello, or early on when I was a kid, was like early on, there was just no evidence of everyday life for Black people there. So I was like, did they just, I don't like, what happened? Where did they go? And I think the monument, yeah, it started out as, I thought performance could be a way to engage with monument in the ways that I felt my people, I don't know who I necessarily mean, but like ritual, performance, re-performance. I'm familiar with monument as being something you do out of routine, like cooking dinner every night for someone because you love them, and that is, a sign of memory. You are remembering, you are holding them in your consciousness, and you're performing daily something that then amounts to life and memory. And I know that's not really what a monument is, but I was really interested, and continue to be really committed to kind of Audre Lorde's question of, or not question, but she challenges us to consider the fact that the master's tools cannot dismantle the master's house. So when I think about, how a monument might perform and dismantle something, I consider the ways that, master type monuments have not worked to dismantle anything. dismantle, racism, dismantle sexism, dismantle state violence, but how, not the master's tools, but someone else's tools, like, who else makes tools? What other tools do I know about? And what tools can I put to work to try to dismantle his house, or instead build something different? Or what houses have I lived in that have been built by other types of monumental tool sets or toolkits? And so for me, I'm interested in how to build a monument using different types of materials. So I think for me, the monument is about, it's about masks and fabric and sewing and collaborating, and it's about music and singing and dance, and all of those, I think, are the kind of not master given tools that I think I've been interested in using to make monuments, clay, dirt. I learn new tools all the time. So I think for me, the monument, I'm really about anti-monument, I guess, I guess that's the only word for it, because I don't know, maybe you have to like describe what you're doing in relation to the status quo. And so if the status quo is bronze and marble, then I'm really interested in things that are different from that. But you said some wild stuff. I have to think. Yeah, the everyday life. Everyday life. That's in your work.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, and you're into paint, and painting is a tough one because painting is kind of a master form. And I like what you're doing with everyday life. We've talked about this a bit, about still life, and some of your works really subvert like what a still life should be or looks like it's supposed to be. And your portraiture can be very subversive if someone's coming for clarity. It makes me think about sometimes like what makes something, I think we both maybe are interested in like what makes something good, not in a question of like, do we care? But I think part of this like question of monument is like, what is quality, or what is right, or what is standard? And I think your paintings, certainly when looking at them, I think about or beauty. There's a really I have to get this book. I recommend this book to people if they haven't read it. Thick by Tressie McMillan Cottom, and there's an essay in here about beauty and the name of beauty. And so I've been thinking about like not good, but beauty, like what are some alternatives to beauty that are actually more compelling and valuable and accessible to people like us, rather than beauty, which Cottom argues is like a construct of power designed exclusively for white women. So by trying to achieve it, you may be trying to like access something not designed for you, but instead there are like lots of other value systems, ways to be powerful that are not necessarily beauty. And I've been thinking about that in relationship to painting and art and like an art object.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm thinking about in my work. And for this show specifically, just asking people to be a little bit slower looking and try and consider that beauty can exist in things apart from value and ideas of quality. That's really interesting. You'll have to send me that.
Yes,
I'll
send you the scanned.
But you kind of hinted at my other question, which was like technical. curiosities regarding the work Unsettling Grounds. Like, how did you happen upon this specific shape? Is there any intention behind that specific shape? Is there anything behind the placement of the objects within the structure? Like, some of them you have to crouch down pretty low to just to see them, and then some are a little bit closer to eye level. Like,
Yeah.
why is that?
Yeah. Well, it was really a hard thing to make. I had a lot of help from Ed Miller, who's on the staff at UVA, and I was like yapping away about this project like on the first day of the semester, and he was like, "Oh, I can help." That was a mistake on his part, but he is a kind man, and he continued to help me make this. And so it was about welding the structure. And then we were like, where should the windows go? And I was like, should we calculate some things and like make sure the windows are all like, and he was like, maybe, then I was like, maybe we should just start. So we like welded the windows, and then I had some objects. I had to go back to New Jersey to get some objects that were part of my like, collection of Charlottesville, Sally Hemings, Main Street, just stuff I'd gathered over time. And yeah, some of them were going to be legible for augmented reality and some of them weren't. So in some ways I put the ones that, maybe needed to be viewable through, using a phone. Those could be at easy to read level, whereas the ones that weren't image based could be a little bit more obscure. But I like to think of this as a draft. I mean, I think where the objects are and how they're mounted inside the plinth was a bit trial and error, because it's really a kind of a gallery, and I need to figure out how the interior of that gallery gets like better, more clearly or more resolved in some ways. But things I found, I mean, I've also been cleaning up my house, the studio, having a baby in 6 weeks or so. And so it's always, in the past few months, I've been really like cleaning things up. And so it was fun to find, paintings that my grandmother had done, works that friends of mine had made for projects of mine that we'd collaborated on, like art other people had given me that could kind of fit into the plinth. And then to go through my archive of videos that are kind of loosely related to Sally Hemings or Charlottesville, and to find really short snippets of those videos to try to connect the objects to. So in the end, it was really an effort to kind of test out a concept to see if this could even work. Like could we make a little gallery, move it from campus to this gallery and put things in it in the timeline we had set out, and could people engage with it in ways that we could observe. I've tried to get better these days at like really observing whether the work is working and like see how people engage with it. And can the collaboration yield unexpected things? So Ed Miller was like, why don't you make the plinth have those curved ends like the Robert E. Lee, the former Robert E. Lee monument plinth. And I was like, okay, if you think we can make the ends into like a, if it can be an ellipse, a smushed ellipse, we can do it. So, collaborating with people who are more familiar with Charlottesville's, architecture and like the things that have just come down, I think really made this sculpture, a mind meld of a few different people's lived experiences of the local landscape. Yeah, but it was hard to make. It was like a heavy
Do you
lift.
call this a draft?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're always a draft. No, not like an iteration.
I'm sorry, my internet is doing something funny.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I'm waiting for it to catch up. I can hear you. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that. But
No, that's
you
okay.
call this a draft. Does that
Yeah.
mean there's like a final? Or is there
Well,
something
this
after
is gonna
this?
move, to Haverford College, where students there, I've been working with them in the um, last fall. They all created speculative artifacts inspired by the special collections at Haverford College, which is kind of a Quaker themed, part of the library there. So that was one goal all along, was that this needed to like house their works. And and then it's going to move to Austin, Texas, to go in a gallery there where we're collecting, we're trying to pull together a group of artists who can propose speculative objects down in Austin to go into it. So the idea is that it moves and hopefully doesn't fall apart, but also gets better as it moves, gets patched up, and maybe the inside takes different like forms as it moves and migrates to different locations. So it's a draft. It's an iteration.
And what are you wanting people to walk away having seen this work, specifically in Charlottesville, this Charlottesville iteration of it?
I want people to be like, whoa, what is that? And I was really excited about the whole exhibition. I think for me, seeing my work next to Patrick and Sandy's work and being able to have a conversation with them made me think about like, oh, what is curation and what is in a gallery? I'm trying to make a little gallery inside another gallery. And in this particular process, it was nice to be in a show with people who I thought had a really kindred sense of what a monument could be, like a future monument could be. And so I hope that people visiting the show saw like 3 artists engaging in different ways with experiments in monument making. I think that's a hard thing about monuments, is you actually do have to, it would be better if we were testing them out. That's what I like about Monument Lab, is that it kind of helps to run them through. And I don't remember histories of people like testing the monuments out, although I've seen images of the Statue of Liberty traveling, just the flaming torch traveling around the country to try to raise money for it. And so I think there's really a space and a necessity for experimental projects so that we can see if the public likes the monument. And I hope people take away a kind of, the concept of it, and, think through the concept a little bit and ask themselves what they think might be buried under the ground they walk on, so that they can, so when we install it again here in Charlottesville, people are ready to offer up objects for the monument, because my dream is that it really comes back to live here eventually.
Awesome. I am going to pass the mic back to Maureen as we're closing. I think she has some announcements to make, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. So can you all hear me okay? Great. Thank you both so much. This was a really wonderful conversation. I am going to, let's see, just quickly close tonight's conversation with a few announcements. First, I just want to thank all of you for coming. I included links to both Marisa and Tori's websites in the chat. So if you have follow-up conversations with them or questions for them, if you want to see more of their work, I encourage you to follow their work. Marisa and Tori, will you also put your Instagram handles in the chat while I make one more announcement, just in case that's a good place for people to follow your work as well. And I mentioned Tori's show opening next Friday. Would love to see all of you there. It's from 5 to 7:30 next Friday, November 5th, as a part of the Charlottesville First Fridays Art Walk. And then 2 more just really quick announcements. We have an event coming up on November 15th that is a virtual, what we're calling a TV dinner. So we traditionally do a big 100% crowd-funded grant arts event that we are unable to host safely in person this November, but we are going to do it on Zoom. Tickets to that event are $10. We're going to have artists present on projects they need funding for, and everyone at the event will vote for the artist they want to give a grant to, and the grant is made up of pooled $10 tickets from everyone who attends. For those of you who live in Charlottesville and might attend that event, with your ticket comes dinner from Pearl Island and dessert from Baker No Bakery, that we'll schedule. Like it's like a takeout. That's why we're calling it a TV dinner, because you know, sit at home and watch TV and eat dinner and then vote. We did this in March and it was very successful. We gave a almost $4,000 grant to Myra Anderson, a poet in Charlottesville. So she will be presenting on her project at this event on November 15th. So I'm going to put a link in the chat quick for tickets to that, which are on sale. If you would like to come, the tickets are open through next week, and they are $10 each. And if you are an artist and you have a project you need funding for, so you have an upcoming exhibition, and you need to frame all the work in your exhibition, you have a project, you know, sometime next spring that you need about $3,000 for, you're going on tour and you need to pay your rent while you're gone for 2 months or 3 months, we would love for you to apply. We extended the deadline through November 3rd. And I'm going to put the link in the chat here. So if you're an artist who is interested in applying, the application is very short. It just asks what you're doing, why it's important, some images, and a short budget. Please send it to artists you know who might be interested, who live in Charlottesville or any of the surrounding counties. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm going to close this out. I will send the link to the recording out to all of you who attended if you want to send it to friends who you think would be really interested in this conversation. And our YouTube page will also have the talks from the other artists who are a part of this exhibition. And yeah, I just want to close out by thanking Marisa and Tori both for their time and the work they put into tonight's talk. And Marisa, the work you put into this exhibition, this piece, and Tori, the work that you are putting into the next exhibition that is opening next week. So thank you all so much for coming. So glad you're here. You were here, and we'll see you hopefully soon at the next artist talk or in the gallery.
Thank you, Tori. Thank you, Maureen. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you,
Good night.
Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.